So I opened up the channel with what you could call a bit of a negative video. And I'm really not about that. The negativity, I mean. The whole reason for starting a YouTube channel was really to talk about the things that I'm both excited for and passionate about. And video games are one of the biggest things that I'm passionate about. And while I can't promise that I won't fall into negativity every now and then, today is a different day. Today, with the combined might of both Sony and Nintendo showing off their slate of third-party games for the next few months, I am excited. It's honestly been a hot minute since I've actually been this genuinely excited about the video games coming out, both soon and in the next few months. 2023 has already been a strong year for video games, with some absolute hits and a few misses, but the last quarter of the year feels like it's just flooding us with game after game after game. Fall is generally a big time for video games, as the holiday season is close by, and everyone and their dog is looking for something to play as the pumpkin spice latte makes its annual return, the jack-o'-lanterns go up, and it all culminates into those Christmas trees and winter settling in. But this year, man, there's so much stuff that things are actively spilling out into the new year. And now even that historically bare period of January, February is seeming a little crowded. So with all that said, I figure I'd just go through month by month and outline what I plan on playing, what I'm excited for, and what I think you may not even be thinking about that's rather cool. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the next few months. October, as is the case almost every year, is the month for video game releases. And this year is, of course, no different, with the releases for almost every genre of video games pretty much covered. And there's really no way any one individual will be playing everything that comes out this month, so rather than even remotely try, I'll mention the 3 games that I plan to prioritize this month, and then maybe mention the other ones in an honorable mention kind of section. So, the first, and perhaps the biggest game of them all, perhaps even for the whole year, is Spiderman 2. Spiderman 2 is so big that quite a few games either got delayed or X-nayed themselves out of fall 2023 entirely, and they did that for good reason. Spider-Man 2 looks like it's going to continue the trend of being a game that is both a really fun, open-world game, and that has a unique, interesting, and engaging storyline. The team over at Insomniac Games has been carefully crafting their own unique Spider-Man universe, first with the original Spider-Man game, and then with the smaller but equally impressive Miles Morales game that launched with the PlayStation 5. And now Spider-Man 2 looks like it's going to be the culmination of all the build-up and hard work of the previous 2 games in the series. And beyond just high expectations for the story and the gameplay, the thing that is the most impressive to me about Spider-Man 2, at least in its PR materials, is the length of the game. Spider-Man 2 is supposedly no longer in duration than the first Spider-Man game, which means there's a focus on quality over quantity. And as anybody who's played a Sony first-party sequel will tell you, padding and bloat has been a bit of an issue with their recent releases, Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War Ragnarok being prime examples of this. Now, while Spider-Man 2 is most certainly going to dominate the mindshare of the PlayStation, and perhaps even the general gaming audience in October, there's one game that has the misfortune of coming out before it. The game in question is Lords of the Fallen, another Souls-like game that has quite a few Souls addicts like myself very excited. Souls fans have already had a really good year, with Liza P releasing earlier just a month or so ago, but where Liza P channeled aspects of Bloodborne and Sekiro, Lords of the Fallen seems to draw inspiration from Dark Souls and Elden Ring even. There's things like major build variety, dual wielding, combat that focuses on both magic and weapons. There's a focus on exploration, there's a dark fantasy world to uncover, and most interestingly, a very unique mechanic in the Umbral Realm shifting. The Umbral Realm is a kind of underworld dark version of the game's world that you can shift into at any point while playing the game. What happens though is you go into a darker, bleaker version of the world where you face tougher enemies, have a unique and different landscape, and lots of secrets and things to uncover. It's interesting because I never thought I'd see the classic Soul Reaver shifting mechanic make a reappearance in a Souls game. But hey, it's a clever and interesting idea. What's also neat about Lords of the Fallen is that many of the Souls-like content creators and YouTubers have already gotten their hands on the game, and opinions are very, very positive. So this is certainly a game to take a stab at either after Spider-Man 2 or sometime soon in the next few months. And speaking of after Spider-Man 2, there is one more game coming out in October, a mere week after Spider-Man 2 comes out, and that's Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is one of the games that got delayed till after Spider-Man 2, but there's an argument to be made that a week was not a long enough delay. I really feel for Remedy Games, the developers behind Alan Wake 2 here. For a horror game like Alan Wake, there really is no better time than late October, where a lot of people are in the Halloween mode and are looking for something scary to play. And Alan Wake 2 is a special thing for a lot of people, myself chief among them. It's crazy to think about, but the original Alan Wake released in 2010, so it's been a good 13 years since the original game convinced me to pick up an Xbox 360. The original was fantastic, even if it was somewhat ignored due to its long Xbox exclusivity. The remaster only came out for the PlayStation consoles this year. Now, what's truly special about Alan Wake is the fact that the game ended on a cliffhanger. So fans have long waited to see the story get a proper conclusion. And since that time, Remedy has really dazzled and impressed with the likes of Control, a sci-fi third-person shooter set in the same universe as Alan Wake, and they've even teased a proper return to Alan Wake's story in that game. And now, in 2023, 2 years after the sequel was officially announced, we're more or less in the month where it comes out. And fan expectations are one thing, but similar to Lords of the Fallen, quite a few video game outlets have had a go at the game at a preview event, and everybody seems to be really impressed with the ambition and the survival horror focus here. As if there was ever a chance that Remedy would flub the passion project that they themselves have willed into existence, getting the IP back from Microsoft and self-funding the development of the game. And given that the other big horror game, Alone in the Dark, has shifted over to 2024, I think Alan Wake 2 is going to be the major focus in the fall for horror game fans. And with that, I'd say we're through October. There's a few other notable releases like the new Assassin's Creed game, the new Forza Motorsport, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and even a JRPG in Disguise 7. But it remains to be seen which of these games actually survive the battle royale that will most definitely occur this month. That actually kind of brings us straight into November. So, with November, I have to say that it's a special month for me. Both because it's a month where I was born, and it's also the month where I got married. So yeah, November is a big deal, and it's a month where I expect to get 2 presents instead of 1. You know, a birthday present and, an anniversary gift or something. And in terms of presents, color me purple with surprise with the fact that Tales of Arise got a DLC announcement for November 9th, which is actually the day of one of those 2 events I mentioned. Tales of Arise getting any kind of sequel 2 years after it was released is both weird and it's also kind of reassuring. I personally really love Tales of Arise. It was a rare return to form for an action RPG series that was starting to lose some steam, especially after longtime producer of the series, Hideo Baba, kind of quit the series and moved over to Square Enix. I honestly thought that Tales of Arise just hadn't done very well, but it seems like there's either some interest in Bandai Namco to revive the franchise, or at least test the waters and see if people are still interested in a Tales game. For me, I'm going to make some serious time for Tales of Arise whenever it comes out. So the fact that it's coming out in November, which, is kind of a little bit of a bare month for me, is really exciting. And given that the DLC is supposed to be a good solid 20 hours of gameplay, well, I assume this will take up at least the first week or two of November, especially since October is going to have Spiderman 2 and Alan Wake, and so I'll be jumping into Tales of Arise's DLC after I'm done with those two games. And then the rest of November is a little bare for me, especially given the fact that I still haven't made it to Yakuza 7 in my playthrough of the Yakuza games, or Like a Dragon 7 as they're calling it now, to really jump on Gaiden and kind of see where Kiryu's story is at the moment. I assume I'll get around to it eventually, but I've got quite a few Yakuza games to work through, including Like a Dragon Ishin before I take a stab at this one. But honestly, November being mostly open is fine, because I've got some games from earlier in the year that I plan to get into as well. November will most likely be a big RPG month for me, in that I'm either going to take a stab at Starfield, which I have in my backlog, or jump straight into Baldur's Gate 3. Not sure which, but either game is a huge endeavor, and I expect that will dominate whatever's left of November, if not a good chunk of the next month. Speaking of which, I don't have too much for December, as it's mostly slated to be both a traveling month to visit family and do all that stuff, and it's also going to be a bit of a backlog month. I assume I'll jump more into the Nintendo stuff I missed earlier in the year, like Octopath Traveler 2, or Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, or even Xenoblade 3, which I think has some DLC out and some other things. So that, either I'll jump into one of those big games, or I'll grab a bunch of smaller games, and that'll kind of lead me through the holiday season and into the new year with January in 2024. Now, 2024 and the new year will start us off with two big games and one hidden gem. For me, the year will likely start off with the new Alone in the Dark revival from the Embracer Group publisher, which I'm honestly pretty excited for. This newer take on Alone in the Dark is certainly interesting. It's a period piece, but what I like about it the most is the acting talent involved. David Harbour is a really different and unique choice to play Carnby, the protagonist of the series. And I gotta say, I really dig the idea of a different, less kind of heroic protagonist and more of an everyman kind of going through the horrors that we're gonna see. So I'm a huge survival horror fan. Alone in the Dark, I already was up for making time for it in 2023. And so January 2024, opening up with this game is honestly awesome. Moving further into the month, we've got a game that I honestly never thought would ever make a return or be released in the US again, in Another Code Recollection. This came from Nintendo's Nintendo Direct. It was a game that I never really picked up, despite my love for writer-designer Rika Suzuki and her excellent work on the two Hotel Dusk games. A big reason for my passing on the original release was the fact that the second game never really made it to Western shores. So I'm honestly really excited to dive into what I assume will be a really strong story and a solid adventure game. And adventure games are a genre that I feel are really more than a little barren these days. I also have to give a huge shout out to illustrator Taisuke Kanasaki, who's been keeping the series alive by tweeting out images of the main character, Ashley. He did so in 2022, and one of those images that he tweeted out actually became the basis for the cover of the game. So it's clear that the people involved want to revive this franchise and this type of game, and man, am I rooting for them and it to work. We need well-written, interesting, and intriguing adventure games in today's gaming landscape, and hopefully some of the best people in the business are going to be back with this game. I have it pre-ordered, and it's going to be probably the game that I will give the most weight to in January, maybe even more so than Alone in the Dark. And speaking of later, let's finally talk about how the month ends, with the release of another huge fighting game in Tekken 8. Tekken 8 is a big deal for a lot of fighting game fans. This feels like really the first next-gen Japanese fighting game, in a way that perhaps Street Fighter 6 from earlier this year was not, since it was cross-gen between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. For me, I actually plan to seriously get into Tekken 8, and I'll likely play it online in a way that I've only ever played 2D fighting games. I'll see how it goes, but with the trailers and the information about the game, it really looks like it may very well become the primary fighting game that I play. Seriously and somewhat competitively at least. Now, I get that this video has already gone on for way too long, but next there's, February. And February has us getting an RPG combo of Persona 3 Reload, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, and Final Fantasy Rebirth, which is just 3 big, massive RPG experiences being crammed into 1 month. I'm assuming Final Fantasy Rebirth, or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, is going to take the spotlight here, what with Persona 3 Reload being a remake and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus being a new IP, but I think they're all solid games and I'm excited for each of them, even if, like the majority of people, I'll probably be focusing on Rebirth first, going to Grand Blue Fantasy Relink second, and then Persona 3 Reload I'll get to at some point. Finally, I think I'll end by noting that the last game that I'm excited for that bleeds all the way into March is Unicorn Overlord. And that might seem like a weird name, but given that it's a Vanillaware game, that title should hardly surprise you. And I'm a huge fan of Vanillaware, and while I didn't get to 13 Sentinels yet, I'm saving that one for a rainy day. I was really a huge fan of Dragon's Crown and Odin Sphere, and Odin Sphere was very RPG-like, even though it was a side-scrolling action RPG. I'm really interested to see what the studio does when it actually tackles a full-fledged strategy RPG. I expect it'll be nothing short of stellar. It'll be deep, there will be a lot of good story, beautiful artwork. The trailer looks amazing, so I can't wait for that. And I think we'll close it there. In closing, I have to say that this is the first time in years that I have a schedule and a set of games more or less mapped out going in as far as 6 months from now. I'm sure things will move and adjust, but man, video games, they're not even remotely slowing down. And this coming after a bit of a slow period in the last 2 years with the pandemic and things getting delayed, I think it's going to continue to just get insane. And it's going to be really difficult to keep up, and I'm sure our backlogs are going to balloon and really grow in the next year or so. But hey, I'd say that's a really nice problem to have, and exciting for those of us that enjoy and love to play video games. So that's it. I'm super excited for a lot of the stuff that's coming out, but I'm also curious to hear if there's something on this list that really spoke to you or you're excited about, or if there's something that I missed. Leave me a comment down below, and I'd love to kind of discuss that and kind of see what the new year has in store for you and us.